Good afternoon. We'll begin with presentation D on your agenda today, and we'll have the group introduce themselves to council. You will have 25 minutes for your presentation, followed by 20 minutes of questions and answers.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Mayor, good afternoon. City Council, good afternoon. Happy and privileged to be here, and we hope that you find our presentation both compelling and certainly the group that you may choose to work with in this multi-use pathway project. We're going to really present in sort of four pieces here. I'm going to introduce our project team, our understanding of the project, our delivery methods, we'll outline those, and then certainly introduce some projects that we think further provide insight into our experiences and things that we similarly may choose to do here. Myself, Kevin Mangan, I'm here in the Stantec Naples office, and I'll be the project manager. Andrew Core to my right is from our Atlanta office. Andrew is a landscape architect and an expert recognized actually nationally in trail and complete streets work. Jared Beck, also from our Naples office, Stantec, both a landscape architect by training but city planner. And Daniel Flynn is here with us for engineering, and he is one teammate, Grady Miner, who has joined the Stantec team for engineering purposes and support. But really behind this team, there are a number of other people, both in local offices and nationally known for their work in complete streets, urban planning, transportation design, and we have a set of resources beyond that should we need to introduce GIS, surveying, environmental. We certainly have the capability to do that for this project. So Stantec, we are a strong believer in complete streets. We're committed to moving people, not just automobiles. And the modes of transportation beyond the automobile are many, and you understand those, I know. But we are recognized as a leader in complete streets across the nation. So the fundamental understanding is here, and your request is to both design and have implemented pathway systems here in the city. And we believe that this local strength of our consultants, as well as our national expertise brought together, really gives us the ability to provide livable, equitable, and sustainable solutions to this end. So the multimodal options in all communities truly are necessary, but certainly here so in Bonita Springs. It improves the quality of life for its residents, both as a recreational base, but also as a moving to school, moving to work, these sorts of things. Attracts new residents and businesses and helps maintain and promote jobs and economics. Demographically speaking, there are a number of shifts underway, and those trends are both local and national and go hand in hand. But our younger people and the millennials and all, they want better parks. Their communities, they want them to be walkable. And access to all parts of the community is important to them. It's also very true for our active seniors and our older population. This demographics critically important. I'll touch on that again in a minute, but they're leading to all kinds of new patterns of use and transportation. One of the things that you mentioned in your RFP as really a top priority is safe passage to schools, access to schools for children. And here, actually interesting, we're in the middle of recreating this intersection at Terry Street and Old 41. But certainly we know and we've seen, the communication of children back and forth in that intersection up until now, going back and forth from their home to school down on Pine Street and on Terry. So critically important that we address this, but there are many other national trends as well. Health in America in our communities is certainly one thing that our multi-use trails address. Biking is a critical mode of transportation for many, particularly here in Bonita Springs. It allows them to get to school, it allows people to get to work, as well as the recreation base and access to the attractions and the points in the community of interest. I was talking about the older population a minute ago, and that older population in this figure accounts for about 13% of the people in the U.S. But the unfortunate number goes up in terms of accidents and deaths in that regard. And so in the Bike and Ped Master Plan report, it was reported that 48% of the community here is 55 and older. So even a more important element in terms of demographics and how we serve them through connectivity, through the pathway systems that we create. And as always, money is an important thing. Access to funding, and we'll speak a little bit more of that in detail, but we've been able to do that across a number of our projects. So it's not just budgetary within your programs, but access to federal dollars and others that's critically important. So the priorities that you had listed were the safe routes to school, connection to recreation and points of interest in the community, that the potential impacts for the implementation of trails are considered, both natural and built. We have to have a balance in that. And the cost, obviously, to design and construct is important. Further to that understanding, you've asked that we would bring the best both local and national practices to bear in delivering the service, coordinate with additional transportation initiatives that you have ongoing in the community, provide state-of-the-art solutions to these needs, and then to implement these multi-use pathways in the city. And one of the things I like to think about with our team is that we are already at the forefront of implementation in the city. In the Old 41 in downtown redevelopment is certainly a part of that. Grady Minor with delivering other projects in and around the quadrant plan area. And so we have been, if you will, implementing some of these things now for the last 2 or 3 years in that regard. So with that, I'm going to ask Andrew to speak a little bit more to the project delivery with that background.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, it's an honor to be here and talk to you today about something I'm very passionate about and the entire team is passionate about. Kevin has given a great overview about kind of the context for why we're here today. Like Bonita Springs is like a lot of other communities across the country, wanting to make a change, seeing the value of multimodal options for all of its citizens. And so what I'm going to really speak to now is our project delivery. How do we get this done for you all? Because at the end of the day, you've done a lot of planning, you're continuing to do a lot of planning, but we're at that crossroads where we actually have to do implementation. Where do we make it become a reality? And that's really what we want to help you do. This is what we call our integrative design approach. All cities, in the heart of that diagram is the city, the community, wherever we are. It doesn't matter what size you are. And there's integral components to everything. Walkability is important. Transportation is important. Urban infrastructure, stormwater management, utilities is critical, as is the urban form, that redevelopment, both civic and private buildings, making that what we know as a community. And so that's how we think about these projects. It's not just 10 feet of concrete going down a particular roadway. It's really trying to bring the community together. We think these types of options, multi-use pathways and other tools in our toolbox, can really be the silver bullet for a lot of ways, to help people get better schools, to improve quality of life, to get people to jobs, to draw people to come and move to Bonita Springs. All of those things are really important. As a part of that, public involvement, you'll see that inner ring is public involvement, absolutely critical. It's not just a checkbox for us. It's really we want to engage the community, and Jared's going to talk more about that in a moment. But here's the other one that's really important, leveraged investments. How do we take public dollars, spend them wisely, and help leverage private development and other development going on? That's how we want to marry those two together, okay? It's not just an isolated pathway you're building. You're really building out a community and community development in the process. Our process is very simple. Every process we do, whether shape or form it takes, whether planning or implementation, takes this form. There's always a discovery phase of understanding the community, understanding what we need. There's a prioritization phase of learning really how to implement these things. And finally, there's an inviting success phase. Again, we're all about looking at implementation and getting things built. We love plans, we like doing plans, but we want to see the plans enacted, and we want to see the community really buy into those plans to really sell them and make them champions. One of the things we've noticed about a lot of the plans we've looked at to date about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that Bonita Springs has done is that there is no prioritization. Okay, and so you have lots of different ideas, but how do we prioritize those? You have a limited amount of dollars to spend. You have a lot of people to connect, and so we have to do things well. And so this is really one sample of how we began considering prioritization and how we break that down. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We do it in an empirical way, in a qualitative way, but we help use these to really break that down. I think one of the things we talked about is one of the first things we would love to do for you is help prioritize those. Let's figure out what those are and how to best spend those dollars, and also use those local dollars to help leverage to get federal dollars and other grants and other monies to spend. So that's really what I think is an important starting point. And we can talk more about that later in Q&A. The other thing we do with all of our projects is we apply performance metrics, meaning we quantify what we're doing. It's not good enough anymore to say we'd like to have more people get on a trail. What does that mean? We really want to see connected communities, and these are just some of the sample ways in which we do that. Lowering average speeds, making it more walkable and friendly. Perhaps preserving a tree canopy and adding more to it. A big one is Vision Zero, making communities safe. Remove pedestrian deaths and bicycle deaths entirely from a community. That should be a goal for any community, really. But the beauty of this performance metrics is that we can use it during the process and we test the project afterwards. Because again, these are public investments, and we want to be able to go to the public and say, these are really important, and look what we've done to improve the community, and we can test it. And then we can apply those results to the next project. So it's an iterative process. You're always improving and bettering your community with each of those projects. Context-sensitive solutions. We know this, and I think you know this as well. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to your community to getting people better connected, okay? And we have a whole toolbox of ideas, depending whether you're on Terry Street or you're on the FPL Trail area. You have different constituents, different geographic considerations, different right-of-way considerations, different environmental issues. All those we think through. So you might be in an urban area where you have limited areas and you have to retrofit, reuse existing infrastructure. Or you might be in a suburban area where you have lots of room, which we typically have, but there's no pedestrian facilities at all. And how do we bring place to that area? How do we kind of really make it something unique? Simply just a road corridor. So all of those different ideas we want to bring to the table, and we think about those in more detail. And I'm going to let Jared speak to more about our other tools in terms of community engagement.
Thank you. A very strong community engagement process is something that is so important for the work that we're doing, not only in delivering a great end product, but also in ensuring that we have a community that's on board and engaged in what we're doing and supporting you throughout the process. We've got a strong approach that we like to do and we've had success in working within our communities. And the first step is really taking advantage of what we've got. There's a tremendous amount of technology available to us right now. And so we like to use this to get in early on in the process to get people aware of what's occurring, what we're going to be doing, keeping them informed and engaged throughout the process, and continuing long after it's done, and just simply maintaining their involvement. We also like to simply go and be a part of the community. I think some of you know us. We want to bring the community in. We like to have them be involved, whether it's looking at the plans that we're doing, to being out walking through the areas and the specific sites that we'd be looking at. And then we also like to have fun. This is our community. This is home. The people that are involved in this and giving their time and their focus, they want to enjoy it. And so it's something that should be a quality experience for them. We recently used these exact sort of 3 steps in a project that we did in Collier County. It had a very specific scope. The county was doubtful on the response and involvement that they would have throughout this process. But we started early on and pushed out a really strong social media campaign. We got the public involved months in advance. We went out and met with people. We did community groups. And we started this survey, which was their end goal, to have a statistically accurate survey. We started it with a community festival, and it was geared around families. In this case, we needed to have 380 surveys to achieve their 95% accuracy. In this process, in really working these different avenues, when it was done, we had 1,850 survey responses and 3,500 individual comments from the public. And it was exactly what the county wanted, so far more than what they had anticipated. And this is not only helping us in guiding the vision, but it also helps us in helping you find the funds to pay for these projects. We know that that's a critical element. Every single one of the grant funding programs you see on your screen are ones that we've been able to work with our clients in accessing. You know, one of the strongest, most compelling things that we can tell the grantors as we go through this process is that you had the public involved. This is a focused effort. It's consistent. It's what they want. You will support them on it, and it's delivering a constant message. So all of these things really come together and playing a very strong part in the overall process that we're working towards. Andrew?
So we're going to spend the last few minutes just going through 3 or 4 sets of plans and ideas that we've put forth, show you some of the work we've done, and hopefully you all recognize the first one. We'd be remiss if we didn't point to the work along Old 41 and Phelps Avenue. Really close to being finished. We've got another couple of months yet before we reach completion on the project, but you know, mindful of where we started. There was no pedestrian realm in many of these streets. There was no safe place for a pedestrian or a bicyclist or somebody with a baby carriage or to walk the dog or whatever it may be. And so one of the first things that was done was the addition of those sidewalks in the side streets in Phelps. Very important. And one of those sidewalks on Phelps is the 10-foot width for the multi-use path dimension. Down Old 41, a number of things that were accomplished, but really the pedestrian realm that was there was one of avoidance. You know, the old brick concrete sidewalks were really sort of a last thought. They went around utility poles and parking and other things, and the pedestrian was thought of generally in last, if you will. In the work that's been done, all of the work that's been done, the pedestrian and those sidewalks have gotten widened and have become a priority along Old 41. And then certainly when we talk of state-of-the-art and other thinking, you know, Terry Street is being transformed, but Pennsylvania has been transformed in the course of the work to go from a standard intersection, lighted intersection, to now roundabout. That really speaks, I think, well to this project, and again, bringing state-of-the-art thinking to projects.
As Kevin mentioned earlier, my name is Daniel Flynn, and I'm with Grady Minor. And before I get into my slide, I just want to tell you how excited we are to team up with Stantec with their national expertise and then our local knowledge. We feel like we bring a pretty good team to the table for you guys. But I'm sure all you're aware, Grady Minor has been around since 1981, so we were here before the city was even a city. Our office is about 1.5 miles away from where we're speaking today. And just to give you an example, we do work throughout the city, all around the city, but just specifically talking about the quadrant plan, what kind of projects that we've been involved that are actually within the quadrant plan. And on the northwest part of the quadrant, that Publix redevelopment area, we were the engineer of record. Brent Addison is actually here with us today. He was the engineer of record for that redevelopment plan. So we know a lot of the background of the stormwater infrastructure, the boundaries. We have all that information in our file system already. Another part of the quadrant plan is the southeast part and Hidden Lakes, and we're currently working with the developer there. Just like the redevelopment area and the Publix, we have extensive knowledge in that quadrant. So we have an endless supply of available information at the touch of a mouse.
Thank you, Daniel. So we're going to go and kind of take you on the home stretch here to the end of the presentation of the Q&A with a couple other projects. So in Atlanta, one of the projects that's been an incredible success is the 10th Street Cycle Track. And this project has been, this is the first cycle track in Atlanta. It's been, over 1 mile long. It's connected 3 different communities, 2 different parks, and 2 different schools all together. And one of the reasons it's been successful, and we love to talk about it, is we were able to find a more efficient way to engineer and design this. We designed this entirely using aerial photography and digital design. We didn't get full surveys. It was a retrofit of a street lane. So we were able to, you know, the city didn't have a lot of money. We had to find a cost-efficient way to do that, and it was a really successful opportunity, and we've seen the ridership go triple in 6 months, which is pretty amazing. The other one that's, I think, a really great story is Beaufort, South Carolina, and Boundary Street. Again, a 1.5 mile long corridor. And this is what it looked like before implementation began. It was kind of a suburban corridor, did not speak to the needs of the community, lacked development and cohesiveness, and lacked anything designed around humans. It was designed entirely around cars. So this is really their vision, improved development, improved pedestrian connectivity. And this is the corridor in design. And as you can see, you can easily imagine this to be in Bonita Springs. This type of corridor, very similar in terms of environmental considerations and the climate. And they want to see a lot of better improvements, but also connectivity with the bicycle and pedestrian corridor. So what they did is our staff helped them write a Tiger grant. They got $12 million in federal funds and then took those dollars and applied them with other local public dollars. And they spent $33 million, which is a lot of money on a road corridor, okay, to really redesign this entire corridor. Underground utilities, the whole thing, improve infrastructure. And as we know, infrastructure is costly. But here's the key. Out of that process, they have been able to leverage $150 million of private investment. It's going on today, and the project is not finished completion. So developers and the private community is seeing the value of really making walkable, livable streets in their community. And the final one we'll talk about is Marietta, Georgia, branding. Branding and trails are really key. Again, we can use trails to really help create a sense of place and grow a community's sense of worth. This is Rottenwood Creek Trail. Rottenwood Creek, as we all know, is not the most delightful name for any kind of creek. And when we began this project, designing this trail system, we even considered, like, how do we get rid of the name? Right? I mean, do we change the name? It's just a really awful name. There's no history to it. And through that process, with the city of Marietta, we actually developed this idea of calling it Live Rotten. And so we developed a branding logo called Live Rotten, and that it's really not just about people who walk or people who bike. It's people who live there. And this trail, as it's currently under design, is going to connect 2 different universities, multiple different neighborhoods together, 3 or 4 different parks. And that's just a 3-mile segment of it. And this is actually the client with a couple of our staff members. The client made their own T-shirts. They promoted it. This is actually at an economic redevelopment forum. So they're taking the trail out to developers and both private and public side, promoting the trail because they see the value of it and really kind of helping grow the entire community. And it's been a huge success. So much so that they really looked at wayfinding and signage elsewhere. Typically, in a lot of communities, you have great trails and no one knows how to get to them because there's no signs to get to them. And once you're on them, where do you go? And so really, we're working with the city now on all their trail networks, this being the Mountain to River Trail, right through the heart of downtown Marietta, to help brand and really brand their trail. And people really to know how to get to people into the downtown when you're on the trail and take people to the core areas, to the libraries, to other areas around downtown, and really use materials and local ideas as part of that to really help tell that story that's unique to their community. So this is going to look something unique to Marietta that's not going to look like Bonita Springs, but people will know and buy into that because they're in Marietta and really love that place. So with that, I've asked to kind of conclude, and before we go into questions, and just as we always
2-minute warning, I believe.
2-minute warning, so
Thank
that's
you.
great. Well, we'll be there before the 2 minutes. So why Stantec again? As Kevin mentioned, we're national experts in complete streets. We not only do complete streets, we help actually train other communities in the complete street mindset about designing for people, not cars. Integrated planning and design. We have all different kinds of professions here. That's how we think. That's how we work. We work collaboratively and collectively. Jared talked about the value of community engagement, but it's a hallmark of our design. We have a lot of the tools of the trade to do that. Fresh ideas. You've asked for fresh ideas and different ideas, and we can bring both. People who are locally who really get it, and the national expertise, and we can marry those. And I think finally, look, you've done a number of wonderful plans, and you've kind of got to that point where now you're at a crossroads for implementation, and we really want to help you implement that. And we understand the complexities of implementation and how to really get you over to that next stage and to the evolution of Bonita Springs. So with that, we'll turn to questions. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Pete, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin and team. So I'm the designated reader for standard questions that we've agreed on.
Great.
So I'll go through 2 of those, and then we're going to go to individual council member questions.
Sure.
But off the top, though, first, who would be the contact person or persons that staff would be working with?
That would be me,
That would be
first and foremost. And again, just speak to that local presence
Right.
and as a member of this community. and then bringing really all this national expertise with us. But that would come through me, and then from there out to the team, back to staff. That would be the normal course of communications.
Okay, thank you. So, the questions have a particular focus with respect to the part of the RFQ that talked about our desire to have state-of-the-art design techniques to provide a showcase multi-use path system. So the first is, what would you identify as the top 3 innovative features that are imperative to a successful and well-used pathway facility?
Great question. So I'll give you a couple thoughts. I may ask Andrew also some of his thinking. But first and foremost, and we talked a little bit about prioritization, and we talked about identification of need. But the first thing is to make sure that we put a facility in place that functionally meets the need. And that one size not fitting all, as Andrew spoke to, may be uniquely different in one location or another. I'll just point to Terry Street for a moment. If you start on 41 and you head east, we have certainly the first part of that section, a mile or so, excuse me, up until Pine Street is one solution. Then we neck down, we've got a 50-foot right-of-way as we come over the railroad tracks. That's going to require a different solution, most likely, but one that's compatible to what's come before it. And then beyond that, Terry becomes, well, we'll have a roundabout, and then beyond that is really 2-lane divided. And so that may be third. And so the combinations of these things, whether in a linear fashion or on top of each other, is critical. And I think one of the things, and I'm just going to point to what's been done in the redevelopment corridor, I think if we are very careful about the trail solution and what else may happen with that land that trail is on, and I use the 41 by example, and we spent a lot of money, the city has, in managing drainage. But the value of land, if you will, urban land on a square foot basis is extraordinary. And so the benefits that we get both vertically and then, if you will, in payback to the community, breadth of use in this case for trails, access to businesses, schools, places of work, these are sort of the critical overlying elements of solution. Andrew,
I'll add 3. I'll call them technologies, or I don't know if closest technologies to answer your question. Number 1 is materials. So typically you have concrete sidewalks, asphalt sidewalk, trails, those types of things. We begin to see now a move to Flexi Pave and other materials. So think about this. This is happening more and more. Typically you'll build one trail. It's 10 feet wide, and it's concrete. Now what we're actually looking at doing is introducing multiple materials on the surface. So if you're someone who has knee problems, okay? I'm going to have knee problems in a couple of years because I play tennis on hard courts. So when I'm 65, I need to have a soft surface to walk on. And what we've done is, in certain locations, we've begun to design a part of a larger trail network. Portions of it are designed in a material that people can walk on or bike on, that are softer and more easily accessible. Okay. Also, we use Flexi Pave as one product that we've begun using more and more. It's porous pavement. So to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, if you want to address green infrastructure and stormwater management, and especially in areas where you have open ditches and you don't have stormwater upgrades, you can mirror the 2. It's a flexible surface, it's recycled, and it costs the same as concrete, if not marginally cheaper over the long haul. The other thing we've been seeing more and more is technology in terms of lighting, okay? We use the typical pedestrian lighting in certain locations. What we're seeing now, and we're beginning to try to use more, is motion-activated lighting. LED lighting that's motion-activated, so it's being used, but it's not just on the entire night in a community that's like lighting up, the moon. We still want to see the moon and stars at night, but if people are moving through a corridor from a safety perspective, it allows consistent lighting different times of the night. It's a more efficient use of materials. Finally, we're actually getting away in terms of plant material, which is important. I mean, I drove out like Imperial Parkway, for instance, and there's no trees. And so even if there was a trail out there, it's going to be really hot in the middle of the day.
Right.
So introducing materials, shade, other types of materials that can last long term, but also we're actually going to native vegetation, reducing irrigation. We don't use irrigation, so when it's installed, it's ready to go. Just used another turf grass, believe it or not, a Bermuda grass that doesn't require irrigation and doesn't go brown in the winter and in the summertime. I'm like, that's amazing to people who use Bermuda grass. And so the devil is in the details with all these different materials. And so there's lots of new innovations we're kind of bringing to the table. If you really want to go fancy and you want to bring something over from Europe, you can create an entire trail built out of solar panels. So it works at night, it works during the day as a energy source, and then at night it lights up the entire trail to where you want to go. So there's a lot of tools we can do. It's all about the money and how we can implement it. And one of the things we always like to do is, in many of these situations, you're going to pay an upfront capital cost. Sometimes it's marginal, but you're getting a long-term benefit. So we can do those numbers for everyone to really say, okay, here's the really long-term benefit, okay? And I think the other thing, again, to think about is combining resources. So if you have to address stormwater, address it using the trail. They're not two separate issues. They're the one issue. Let's address both of them together. Let's address safety and trails together, those types of things. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
The other one is relates to challenges. What are the unique challenges that you anticipate would directly impact multi-use path design and implementation in the city? What are some of the your initial concepts for addressing these challenges, and what are past experiences your firm has had to overcome similar challenges?
So the challenges actually, in many respects, and I'm going to rely for a moment on the bicycle master plan. I mean, you've got a network in that report identified, and if we start there, and just there, obviously there's a number of constituents. I think every district there has interest, if you would, in that report and in that network. So first and foremost, the one challenge, and Jared has spoken to this, is public input and public involvement. As you have that variety of stakeholders, you've got added stakeholders. You're at the southern boundary of Lee County. Some of this connectivity is at and along the edges of Collier County. I think there's conversations there to have with Collier County, particularly as it relates, in a large part, again, the bike master plan to Vanderbilt Road and ownership on one side of the road versus the other. The long range planning for a broader trail that reaches from Collier through Lee County obviously brings Lee County into play. Ownership of roadways, also some thought and process needs to be given to that. A lot of the guidance that's written these days, oftentimes for multi-use trails and dimensions and slopes and these things, comes out of the Florida Department of Transportation. So certainly they are a player in this as well. And then obviously go back to the constituents here and yourselves, critical that input comes to us. As far as the idea of implementation, I think this, and we talked about prioritization as being a key part of some of the upfront work we would do. With that prioritization, I think we need to establish a language of solutions within a certain area that makes sense. It's oftentimes hard to take with knowledge and fixed budgets and things and make sure everything gets touched in the first stroke. There has to be some idea of phasing and where to begin. I think geographically, we would recommend that we're probably 41 and Old 41, Bonita Beach Road to Terry Street, just as a general geography. Again, as we look at the bicycle master plan, about half of the points of interest are within that zone, easily extending up Old 41. It could, be the next move, sort of complete a broader triangle, and begin to reach from there outbound to the other communities and fill in missing connections. And so when I speak to the language of solutions and what I just talked to about Terry Street, how that changes in its complexion, so those solutions, as we put them down, may be appropriate solutions elsewhere in the community, maybe just outside of our sort of phase one area, if you will. But I don't know if anybody else additional thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let me start over here. Steve, with you.
Yeah. Going back to your performance metrics, could you expand on it? You say average speeds, we want to drop that over time. Where are we talking about?
Sure. We're talking about average speeds, we're talking about roadway vehicular speeds. Because especially in tight urban areas, you have a lot of corridors. And I'm not speaking just for you, I'm just in general, not just Bonita Springs. We have typical corridors that have been designed for cars that have a high rate of speed. So you could go put a bike lane out there, but no one's going to use it. Or in many cases where we've seen, this is local here as well, you have sidewalks adjacent to roads and there's no buffer space between the cars and the traffic. We know that if we want to make a more walkable, livable corridor, and it's not just a freeway through the community, speeds have to lower, and it's actually safer for people who are on bikes or people who are walking. We're not trying to limit capacity of a road by any means. What we're trying to do is really align, making sure that people in a downtown aren't flying through downtown, that there are, you have Imperial Parkway for a reason. It's a larger road to move people more quickly, but in certain areas you need to make sure people are driving slow, thinking around their surroundings, and that's addresses safety.
Second question I have for you.
Sure.
How do you measure healthy community?
Sure. There's a number of different ways to do it. One is we can look at the Center for Disease Control has done some of these. One is connecting. There's a lot of causal relationships between people who are active communities, and as trails get built, looking at their lifestyle changes. So you can track certain people over time and what they've done since being an active trail user.
Mm-hmm.
There's also larger community patterns where you can see the rates of obesity, the rates of diabetes going down. You can also track of our people getting healthy. I mean, the idea of just being on the trail itself is part of the health metric. Like you're getting out and you're not using your car, and so you're walking by itself is healthy. So there's a number of different ways to do it. By all means, it doesn't solve all health problems in the community, but certainly a way to begin kind of testing that. And then even the trail itself has become an opportunity to connect people to different needs and services. Do you do a farmer's market along the trail? Do you have health services, a fair along the trail? I mean, those are things that can easily be done and track that performance.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Greg?
Just one, kind of a follow-up. You talked quite a bit about the prioritization of what you're going to look at. And that's one of our concerns, is to help us prioritize where we're going to go first with the dollar spent. At one point you talked about, the social media, getting out there. How does that ratio work? Does it more so, I guess, lean on, all right, the public wants to do East Terry Street, but it's going to cost 3 times the money it would be to do West Terry. Where does that balance come in at?
That's where our work begins together. The balance, truthfully, is one that I think is found exactly as you said. You've got to understand all of Terry Street in this example, and what are the potentials, and in terms of delivering on multi-use trails. And as Andrew spoke to in the cycle track example in downtown Atlanta, not to oversimplify things, but that was a paint job, right? Mm-hmm. And to that end, Andrew and his team also found a way that managed the delivery requirements of that job. So we weren't out surveying, we weren't spending many more months of design. It was designed and delivered with the idea of a certain dollar amount of budget in mind. So that balance and that thought process, and it's really three-dimensional in that regard, has to be given to both. And we would be looking at that sort of a thing, staff certainly included, as to where are we best not just spending the money, but again, we talk to the metrics, that return on the investment. And so I don't think you can come set with one idea and that's the only idea. you do understand that there is a certain amount of need to come to a measured solution. And that measured solution may very well serve both ends, knowing that one end is more expensive in its ultimate form. But maybe there's something temporary or in the middle, if you would, or a first phase of delivering on.
Okay.
Bonita Beach Road's a great example. I think Bonita Beach Road is one of those heavyweights, if you will, in terms of ultimate delivery and budgeting. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be thought of now. And what can we be doing as we move along to see that that roadway and its transportation network is equally as safe and equally as thought of as some of the simpler and low-hanging fruit that we can get to. So.
I brought this slide back up just as a reference point. So first off, I think you've done a lot of work. So you're not going to the community with a blank page and say, what would you like? I mean, what we really have to, the reason we don't do that is because the community, and to some degree, we have to educate them and understand that some of the problems they have, we can't solve with a trail. You know, we have to align the problems and the solutions together. And so a part of it is really coming together and trying to figure out what is some of that framework and building off that framework, and then educating the public. And it's not just speaking to the public and saying this is what we're doing and give us a dot and a sticker. It's also an education process and bringing them along with you. At the end of the day, Kevin's going to be gone, I'm going to be gone, we'll be around. But when the project's done, there have to be people in the community who really buy into this and really become the champions and advocates for it. And so that's really what we want to try to do that. Again, we can use this and quantify this and really walk through people. So you may have a great project. Let's imagine Terry Road's really important that you want to do.
3-minute warning.
Thank you. So, yeah, I know. See, I get long-winded. We can go for hours. But imagine Terry Road's really high priority, but the problem is the cost is really high. It doesn't mean it's lower priority. It means you have to find a different source of funding. And so you help the community understand that and then say, well, here's a series of other projects that we've costed out, and we can do X, Y, and Z, and it connects to the network. And then the lights start going off. So we're really trying to kind of build it together. It's not coming out there, thanks, and leaving again. It's really this ongoing conversation.
Thanks. Amy?
Just
Amy,
some
like
peripheral questions. I'm intrigued by your, I'm intrigued by your, what's it called, Flexi Pave. And I come from a different area of the country where we didn't have these open drainage ditches, I call them. I'm sure you have a more sophisticated term for them. So could you do that over the open areas?
No, if you're going to, I mean, there's lots of different ways to treat that cross-section of a roadway. I mean, if you have a lot of right-of-way, typically in those open ditch areas along rural corridors, you can build a trail behind that because, and you don't affect the drainage at all. Unfortunately, in urban areas, we still see situations where we have open ditch areas that effectively are safety concerns and really don't adequately, at this point in time, address stormwater concerns. But if you think about it, it's a spacing issue. So where that swale is where you build your, whether it's curb and gutter, you build your curb, you build over that. But what's that gap that you have in between can now be used for a variety of things. It can be, you go into an underground detention basin that has porous pavement. You can design the gutter system to go into a series of swales and then back into the system. So there's a number of different ways to do it. The Flexi Pave goes right on top, and then below it goes into something, right? It can go directly back into the water table, into the soil, or it can go into something that's much more engineered with grid aggregate base, piping, and then take it to a broader system. So sometimes what we're trying to do with the Flexi Pave is not to remove all the water from the surface and solve all detention problems. It's to slow that water. Like, the stress on the system is so great, we want to get it somewhere to hold it for just a little bit of time, and then return it to the stormwater system. So there's a lot of different ways to tackle that, and it's all based on the actual situation in that particular corridor. We can design around it.
And just another question, do you ever try to slow down the cyclists?
Well, I think what we have to say is that's an education issue. So if,
Unfortunately, in 30 seconds or less, because I still have a couple of members here. Yeah.
Well, so yes, I think it's an education system. Certain corridors are for certain people. I mean, and there's a lot of people who bike in groups, and the spandex group, and they love the roadway. Certain trails are not for that. It's for, your daughter, your granddaughter, and your spouse moving. So there's different uses for different trails that we would have to align with the decision making.
Great. Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by all these process slides, but I'm more results oriented. Give me 2 or 3 projects you think that you've done recently that would say well qualify you to do this job.
All right, a couple that I can think of right away really is working right here in the city, in the old 41 corridor. I mean, we've worked through a variety of solutions. The bicyclists, there's different area for the bicyclists still to be applied, sharrows and other things. I think that is one example of our work. Another piece of work here at the Florida offices is the overseas trail system that we did down in the Keys. Now, it was about 100 miles of trail work, 25 of which was dedicated to us. One of the things that was interesting, if you will, about that is we were also in an environment that had a lot of educational opportunity, a lot of pause and view the environment. So we took those opportunities to go ahead and make sure that was part of the trail system. Andrew, you may have a couple.
We've done a number of them. We've done projects in Covington, Georgia that have been built, real trails, about 5 miles of those trails. Route 9A in New York City. The entire west side of Manhattan has been designed by Stantec. It includes multi-use trails, as well as a dedicated bike cycle track all out of the road. That's a little different scale. We've done a 10th Street cycle track. We've got projects wrapping up right now in Milledgeville, Georgia. We've got the Hudson River Greenway in New York City that's been completed. We can there's a number of them we can go for a while, but we've done a lot of them. Part of it.
Thank you. Mike?
No, most of what I was going to ask you've kind of covered in the presentation, about a signature look for our bike path that we can carry on to others, and newer technology, cutting edge materials, and you hit on that too, so thanks.
Great, thank you.
Could you go back to this slide for a quick second?
Sure.
That's near the beginning page, actually the...
Mr. Mayor, that was,
This one, sorry.
there we go, yes.
Okay, looks great. What are the realities of this on Terry Street in Bonita Springs? And what are the challenges facing something like this?
Okay, great question. First and foremost, this would be a cross-section that you might expect to see on East Terry. West Terry, the width certainly wouldn't be there for the number of lanes, and certainly not at the railroad section. But if we focus on East Terry for a minute, we have the ability, and we do have sidewalks on both sides. Although we're curb and gutter through there, this would be a choice. Put the road on a diet. And does that mean changing the curb line or not? Maybe, maybe not. We've got drainage issues there. One of the things, again, along East Terry, even with the sidewalks that are there, and when you think about some of the things we've talked about, is this a place sharrows belong? Is this a place where the tracks belong? So the reason I point to those would be a less dollar-driven solution immediately to be able to be affected, or are we talking of something completely different? I predict probably not. East Terry has been recently, in last 2, 3, 4 years, been put in place and landscaped and other things, and so I don't think it's about eroding what's out there on East Terry, but components like you see here are certainly available, including landscape medians and other things, because they're there, they exist.
And unfortunately, we're running over here, so in 15 seconds or less, 5 seconds, any major challenges on Terry Street to inhibiting something similar to this? I've asked it, but I'm asking it again.
Yes,
can this happen? Yes or no?
It's how you put that cross-section together in the width.
Thank you.
And you've got your existing conditions.
And thank you for your great presentation. You got 4 extra minutes, so that's because of you.
Yeah. I'm gonna
thank you.
I'm gonna
so
grant
very
the 4
much.
minutes to him.
Okay. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Appreciate it
Thanks
very
a
much.
lot. Thank you. Matt, you see his bow tie, maize and blue?
I didn't know that Stantec did the downtown.
I didn't either.
Wright must have done the construction and they did the design, right? I didn't know that. Well, now I'm really confused.
That's what happens during these all the time.
Huh?
I don't know. I got my number 1 and 2 easy right here, so we'll see.
You do? I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
Last but not least.
Yeah, this is Frank Forbes. I'm supposed to have an appointment with 3, and then a city council related meeting. So I need to schedule for either late, real late on Wednesday. Not too
Want to see my presentation? I'm going to slip one in.
Sure.
How much is this going to cost us?
What do you want?
Do you work cheap?
Just give me some.
Yes.
Even
Okay, good.
options that I'm not sure. What's my line? What's my line? Early, and then probably have to do it morning Tuesday. So give me a call. I'll call you like 3:30 or 4.
How we doing? Yeah, yeah. Like somebody in the 118, the bullpen, waiting.
Oh, really?
You're getting ready?
Getting ready, getting queued up.
Oh, it's nice.
Is this the last one coming up? It is,
Thank
wow.
God. I mean, no offense.
Well, yeah, no, but you know what? Actually, this went a lot quicker than I would have guessed. Somehow.
Well, some people pulled out.
Yeah.
The 2 biggest books pulled out.
What's that?
The 2 biggest books pulled out.
Yeah, right. Boy, oh boy.
Both doors open.
What's that, Craig?
Stay open both doors to walk in the room.
Hello?
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Can you ask him to address the bicycles on these roundabouts? How they gonna handle that?
I don't know.
It's really rough. It's not good for road bike guys.
Hey girl, how you doing? Good to see you.
For beach cruisers and stuff, it's not bad.
Oh, they're on it too.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what your user is using it, but they're, and I asked this during the design phase, they basically,
So you guys are both.
oh yeah. No, on Old
I
Federal
know,
One,
it's
they're supposed to be on the
big.
road.
I know, that's my bad.
Yeah.
How's
You ride a
everything?
bicycle on it, pretty good.
Road design.
It's very rough.
Oh,
But-
sure.
But their comment was that they'd like to see all the cyclists back on felts for block over.
Oh, get this. Yeah. So Amy, if you're bored and have nothing to do this evening, my friend is actually pitching tonight for the Red Sox. I know you're on the edge of your seat, wondering when he's pitching next.
We're going
Yeah,
to,
he is, Greg, yeah.
we're going,
I just got word. Yeah.
we're going to the free dinner at Zoe's Kitchen. Is where we're going. We're senior citizens.
Yeah.
they're gonna, will we get that on TV though?
If it would, you'd need the Major League Baseball package.
We might get it because we have hot wire in there. We have all kinds of sports.
Okay, you know, hot wire is just coming into our neighborhood right now, yeah. They broke our water main already, so the project has
They're
started.
very good on repairs though, so. We didn't have, our community.
Do me a favor, if you don't mind, later on, call Suzanne and remind her of that fact. She's not real happy right now.
We did, your particular water main or the one on your entire street?
To our house,
To
yes.
your house, yeah. That's all.
To our-
That's
and,
a-
oh, it's interesting, they fixed it, but the water pressure is very low, and the cold water won't go on in the washing machine. In the kids' shower, the pressure is down, and in our shower, the pressure is down. So it's odd. It's been repaired, but it has altered.
Why would the pressure be different?
When Bonita Springs Utilities came out yesterday, they said, I guess they'll shut the water main off, and then where the problem was, they put, I don't think it was a splitter, but it was a reducer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we're working off a reducer at the moment.
But they'll fix it eventually?
Hot wire in Bonita Bay. Yeah. So
But they're gonna put it back
problems
to-
at the mayor's house already
they're
with
gonna
hot
put it-
wire coming in.
They're
They
gonna put it
broke our
back-
water main.
They're gonna put-
Yeah, we need a new water main apparently.
Are they gonna put asbestos in or what?
Yeah, right, but they put us on a reducer.
Well, are they
So,
gonna
so
change it
if any
back?
of you feel like calling Suzanne this afternoon, say, yeah, it's no big deal.
Are they gonna
It was a
change
big
it
deal
back?
last
Little
night when we
reducer.
got back from Universal. Well, because what it did is it reduced the water pressure in the entire house. The cold water into the washing machine did not work, and the kids' shower water pressure was very, very low.
Can't tell that's a woman with long
But we
hair.
have water, so I don't want to say we don't have water.
Was
it warm enough to take a shower?
It was warm enough.
I haven't heard of any major issues like that in
Yeah.
our area at all, in the colony.
Well, we're excited. I don't know how yeah, right. We're excited because Comcast,
There's
nothing
no
against.
community
it's
channel,
horrible.
there's no community channel, did you know that?
If I stand near, I'm sorry?
There's no community channel,
Right. And if I stand, oh, there isn't?
not in Pelican Landing.
BTV 98 will be a thing of the past.
thing.
You can get it on the computer.
You can get on the computer, but we asked.
You can?
We haven't gotten an answer from Hot.
Yeah, the city's website.
On the computer, but we asked Hotwire to put it on as their thing. We haven't heard from them, but they said they would. We'll see.
Right. Well, no, that's good. Thanks for saying that.
You're leaving Comcast and going to where?
Hotwire is doing all of Bonita Bay. No, it's not an individual thing, it's a community-wide.
But the
They broke our water main a couple days ago.
but the internet is really good.
through it, or?
I'm on the board with Hotwire. They put a reducer in. So our water pressure in our entire house is down, and the cold water into the washing machine doesn't work. Other than that, everything's great.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
No big deal.
That's a good draw.
But I digress.
All right, Fred, we're
I
waiting.
think the Red Sox are at Kansas City,
Put the lights on.
That ought to be a good game.
but my buddy's pitching tonight. I
We
just
do this in the dark.
yeah.
You can put a little light on the guy.
You know what? We're all here. It's
Yeah.
a little bit early. Do we want to start?
Yeah,
Arlene,
sure.
You wanna-
Right ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So if you want to
Yep.
cue this up, welcome.
Welcome. This is the last presentation of today, and we will begin with having the firm introduce themselves to you. It is 1:59. You'll have 25 minutes for your presentation, followed by 20 minutes of questions and answers.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to interview for this project. My name is Brad Davis with Alta Planning and Design. I manage our West Palm Beach office and our Florida operations, and I'll introduce the rest of our team here shortly. We are partnered with Whole Montez for this project. And so for today, I want to go over introduction of our team, talk about our approach to pathway design, talk about some case studies to give you a flavor for how we approach these types of projects, talk about our understanding and approach for this specific effort, and then entertain any of the questions that you all have. So Alta Plan Design, we're a national firm, and we are specifically focused on creating active communities, getting people walking and biking and creating communities where people want to live, spend, and invest their time and money. We are experts in trail planning and design, as well as complete streets. We have planners, landscape architects, engineers, and we also have a group that focuses specifically on programs, the non-infrastructure side of things, so safe routes to school, encouragement programs, education and encouragement and outreach efforts as well. And they also assist with our grant writing efforts as well. This is what we do. This is what we're passionate about. We've planned, designed, and implemented over 8,000 miles of bikeways, walkways, and trails across the country and internationally. We've secured over $120 million in funding through our grant writing efforts, including helping the Lee County MPO successfully win the Tiger Grant for their Complete Streets projects, which ourselves, as well as Whole Montez, helped with implementation. And we're international leaders in terms of research and innovation and design for trails. And we look forward to bringing that knowledge base to you all for this project. In terms of our team, as I mentioned, my name is Brad Davis, and I manage our West Palm operation. Also here is Blake Sanders, and he'll be kind of co-manager for this project for ourselves. He's in Greenville. Have Mike Repsch, who's engineer, principal, and senior advisor for this project. We also have Bob and David with us with Whole Montez. Also listed here, George Hudson will be the principal in charge. He was not able to be here today because he is working on a trail project that we have in Alaska. So, we're kind of going East Coast, West Coast today. And we also have John Cato in our Greenville office, Britt Stork in Atlanta, Greenway specialist, and Brian Ruscher, who's with me in West Palm. He was actually previously with the Office of Greenways and Trails here in Florida and helped manage some of the efforts related to statewide planning for trails, which we can answer any questions about that later. In terms of our structure, you have our core team, as I mentioned. We also have a new branch of Alta Go, which is our international operations, so we're able to pull in design experts from international places in Europe and Asia to really bring you the best in trail design for this project. And as I mentioned, we have our local civil engineering partners in Whole Montez, and they'll talk a little bit about some of their experience and what they bring to the project. But we really love trails. We do them all over the country every day. And are really working in small towns, big towns, everywhere in between. There's such demand. People want to be outside walking and biking, and it's what we're passionate about. And as I mentioned, Alta-Go and some of our international experts that we can call on for specific types of projects.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is David Dowling. I'm with Whole Montez. I'd like to point out that we're locally based, and we've been in Southwest Florida for over 50 years. And as you can see here, listed here, we're a multidisciplinary firm. And for this project, we'll be assigned the detail civil design, the permitting, and the surveying. And recently, we've completed many multidisciplinary, multimodal projects locally in Southwest Florida.
Great. I'm gonna talk about understanding innovation and pathway design, what that means, and walk through a couple of case studies with you all. Before we determine those design guidelines, what they look like, what the signage looks like, we need to understand who's going to be using it first. So we think about those 60% of users that are interested but concerned. That's my 8-year-old son, my 80-year-old grandmother, because that determines what the surface looks like, what your signage looks like, what your landscape looks like. All of those factors really hit home who the end user is. So for these two examples, are we thinking about people that are pulling strollers? Are we thinking about people on skates? Is it skateboards? Is it all of the above? Is it the mom walking the child to school? Those are all of the different aspects that we start to look at. Because it influences when we think about designing the trails for crime prevention through environmental design, CPTED, and those 4 principles. So the landscape that we select that hits home the type of user, will actually help us when we talk about deterring crime and increasing usability of a trail. So we'll always go back to each individual aspect of trail design. We'll go back and touch those 4 points. So we think about overall trail design and being the national and international leader in this. I go back and think about the Small Town and Rural Multimodal Network Guide, which is design guidelines created for FHWA as part of a flexibility memo. So Alta literally wrote the book on how greenways should be designed in rural communities, but also urban communities. So the NACTO guide, we also authored it. And the STAR guide, as we call it for short, we think about speed, separation from the roadway for a side path. We're always thinking about the land use that's surrounding both existing and future. As part of the guide, you can go through and look at the metrics of it as far as separation, what those speed limits should be, what it looks like. And you can go, this is a free guide that you can go and download. Alta authored it. So go use it, use those resources to help as part of this guideline process. So the first approach would be understanding those guidelines, those visionary recommendations. And so I'm going to talk about Greenville, South Carolina, and the Swamp Rabbit Trail. Greenville is about the same size as Bonita Springs. And it started with a plan. It started with a charrette. It started with a workshop, stakeholders, community leaders, city council, to develop that plan of prioritization and what the #1 priority spine would be and understanding what those impacts would look like. And so for that, it was about transforming the future. So the city of Travelers Rest in Greenville County, it plays a large portion of this trail. So it was about understanding economic development for a town that wanted to embrace this as one of their major attractions. And so as part of that branding process, the charrette process, we have a 20-mile spine that stretches from Travelers Rest down to the city of Greenville, South Carolina. We planned it specifically for the brand, for the hospital, for it to be the network where everything would spur off of it. So we planned this Greenway for the 5K that would be happening that would attract 5,000 people. We planned it for the restaurant that was coming, that used to be an old hardware store. We planned for the back of the building, for the bike parking, for the restrooms, for the access. We planned for all of these different activities. We planned for the beer garden and brewery that we knew would happen as part of this. It was always all about economic development. How do we get people off of that spine into downtown to spend money continuously, not just once a week, but we want them to come back twice, 3, 4 times a week. And believe it or not, it's actually about the numbers as well. So 500,000 users a year use this spine in Greenville County. That's the same size as Bonita Springs, or city of Greenville. We talk about the impact of $6.7 million. That's in the rural part of the county, not the city. And we talk about this here. So that's that brand that we started off with at that charrette, that we led through the process, and we pushed people to those downtown businesses.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The case study that I'm going to talk about is the Wolf River Greenway, which is a 23-mile greenway in Memphis, Tennessee that I'm currently managing. And I think even though it's a single greenway, I think it's a good example of all the pieces that went into this project that can go into a whole citywide greenway plan. So the city of Memphis had about 3 miles of this greenway already built, but it became stagnant for years. Nobody wanted to fund it. They just couldn't get anything built. So Alta was hired to do an economic evaluation study of the entire greenway to show the benefits of the greenway. And what that was able to do was able to leverage $25 million from a private donor with an additional $20 million of local, state, and federal monies to realize the benefit of this greenway. So what we did was the Alta team and all of our sub-consultants came on the ground for a week-long design shred, and we literally walked the entire 15-mile greenway, or 23-mile greenway as much as we could, and we developed alignment plans, a full shred report, and broke everything out into prioritization in terms of what segments that we could get built fastest that didn't have much permitting, so we can get them on the ground and get people's juices flowing. That was now facilitating the rest of the greenway design. So the design program for this was not just putting construction plans, but it was really looking at what the city needed to do. Nobody's going to use a greenway that isn't safe and well designed. So we had to do a report for a operations and maintenance manual to go through the SEPTED principles, to go through the crime prevention needed, where are we going to put sky cops at, how the local police department is going to maintain this greenway, the emergency 911 signings, so the emergency responders know exactly where somebody is when the call comes in. In addition, we did design guidelines that stated, because we had multiple design consultants on this project, what exactly the trail standards needed to be in terms of width, material, bridge design, aesthetics, ADA accessible benches, etc. And Alta is currently leading 10 miles of the 23-mile Greenway in terms of doing engineering projects. And in my career, I've never had a project that encompassed so many obstacles. We had to go through local, state, and federal permitting for wetlands, navigational waterways, etc. Some of the weird things that I've encountered on this project, specifically in this phase, was we had an illegal potato chip landfill that we uncovered during construction, 20 feet deep by 100 feet wide of unprocessed potato chips. So we had to, we're doing the construction administration, we had to act quickly to get this resolved, to keep the Greenway built, because one of the requirements of that $25 million from the private donor was we had to have the whole Greenway built by 2020. So, or we forfeited the $25 million. So we're kind of in a frantic mode getting phases out in construction and into construction as quickly as possible to meet that goal.
And I will wrap up talking about the Razorback Greenway in northwest Arkansas. And so it's a multi-county, multiple municipality greenway where, again, Alta came in right off the bat. We had a charrette where we brought in all of the stakeholders, all of the community leaders from each of the counties and municipalities, as well as the Alta team, to develop those guidelines and standards. And so those guidelines range from the brand of what it would look like, how we would start to incorporate economic development into the project, all the way down to the bridges. Every bridge would be identical for this project. They wanted to keep that same language, that same material palette throughout. But we also went ahead and understood, how do we address flooding, how do we address underpasses or overpasses, how do we deal with controlled access, maybe next to a highway, next to a larger speed, a larger speed road, or an increase in traffic. How do we address all of those issues? We looked at the wayfinding signage, because again, it was about creating the spine, but then it was also about selling the story of every municipality and every county, every park, every school along the way. So we developed the sign package that would do such. But it's about understanding what implementation looks like. So it's not just about drawing the pretty pictures as part of the conceptual team or the charrette team. It's about understanding at the end of the day, when the Greenway is built, what will it look like? How will people use it? And so for the Razorback Greenway, we understand the mile markings for the E911 system. We understand how to get people off of the Greenway. And we also understand what it feels like to cut the ribbon on it, what it feels like to stand with the mayor or the council members, let them cut the ribbon and know that this was their project, because we measure success based on the number of people that use it, the number of smiles that you see, the number of 6-year-olds that learn how to ride a bike. That's how we measure success for the Razorback Greenway.
The Lee County Complete Street was Homontez's largest multimodal project. Alta actually worked with the Lee County MPO to help secure the Tiger Grant funding. It's federal funded. And what the issue is if you see the map on the right here, there's a lot of existing gaps in the Lee County bike ped network. And what this project helped to create is to fill those gaps, specifically with new multi-use pathways, sidewalks, paved shoulders for bike lanes, and we also had 11 enhanced Lee-Tran bus facilities. That you got one outside your city hall that was part of this project. And at the end of the day, in just under 2 years, we added 13 miles to this network, and in under, as I said, under 2 years, and for about $8 million. Here's some post-construction pictures. On the left here is one of our 11 Lee-Tran enhanced bus stops. In the middle is a new paved shoulder to be utilized as a bike lane. And then on the right, you have a concrete new sidewalk. And what you're seeing there is actually a flume where we had to maintain the existing drainage, so the drainage actually flows under the sidewalk. These are a couple pictures that were taken by a drone. On the left, you're looking at Corkscrew and 75, where we added bike lanes through the interchange. And on the right is Colonial, where we added a new 10-foot wide multi-use pathway on the north side of Colonial. And this is one of our 11 projects, which we feel was served as the signature project at FGCU Boulevard. Alta actually worked with the MPO to create the concept for this. There was originally an issue with going on the south side with core permitting, so we flipped it over to the north side. And as you can see, there's a safe buffer between traffic, attractive buffer between the traffic and the pathway, and also we added the appropriate, on the left here, the appropriate ADA features.
I'm going to finish up with giving you a bit of a flavor in terms of how we'll approach this project, working with you all in the community. I just wanted to, touch on the fact that, we, our staff with Brian Ruscher has worked at the state level, understands very intimately what the state requirements are for trails, understands the policy and coordination that goes into the statewide trail system. Here through Bonita Springs, the designated, state route comes down US 41, and I'll talk about that. But it also plays out in terms of, trying to secure state funds. We understand what they're looking for, where they want projects to be in order to receive those funds, and we can help you all leverage your funds and apply for the right funds for the right project. As we've mentioned, we've also been working with the Lee County MPO and other local jurisdictions, including Cape Coral and Fort Myers Beach. We just helped them wrap up, or in the process of wrapping up, their bicycle and pedestrian master plans. And we also, with the MPO, have helped develop their vision for the regional trail system here in Lee County. And we also kind of understand the coordination that goes on between the Lee County MPO and the Collier MPO in terms of getting the trails to line up between the two counties. And lastly, we kind of understand the local trail system that you all are endeavoring to build. We do it every day with communities around the country, understand what works, what doesn't, how to build buy-in, and how to phase projects to make them a success. So I'll just talk a little bit about our design process, and we really have kind of two buckets. And so the first phase we see is kind of developing a design palette for Bonita Springs in terms of implementing trails. And then from there, we can go through the process of doing more detailed design and ultimately constructing trails. So for phase one, we're calling this the system palette and segment prioritization phase. And really what we want to do is set the stage for what trails are going to look like here in Bonita Springs. And so that means developing wayfinding standards and material standards and placemaking standards, maybe working on project prioritization with you all, maybe based on both community desires as well as some of the technical feasibility components of different trail segments. And then also thinking about the life cycle costs of maintenance and operations. And we will do all of this through a community charrette process to get buy-in, build support, with the end product being Bonita Springs Trail Design Standards Manual. So regardless of what project or segment you're working on, you know what the trail should look like and what elements go into it. So in the next phase, we say we identify, the preferred corridor or, set of corridors. We'll go through a conceptual design phase. And here, we've kind of picked one just to kind of illustrate, how we might approach it. We want to build on, we know we aren't starting from scratch. You all have been, planning and designing and doing other things in the community that relate to this effort. The Bonita Beach visioning study, the work that you all are doing on Old 41, the fact that the state alignment for the trail system runs along US 41. We want to make sure we understand those connections already, and so we also in kind of doing some kind of surveys of the of Bonita Springs with Matt prior to this being released. He kind of explained all the connections and dynamics of connecting neighborhoods to the different parks, which are, some of them are highlighted in green here, taking advantage of the school connection. And so, we definitely see, Terry Street as an opportunity as a first phase to create this spine, similar to what we've done in some of the examples that Blake and Mike touched on. So we can do it either in one shorter phase, or we can think about kind of a longer corridor and work with you all to develop the concept for it, and maybe break it into smaller segments for implementation based on feasibility when funds become available, or the type of funding strategy. But the idea would be a key deliverable would be the corridor conceptual design. And so how do we put that palette that we develop with the corridor design together? And so this is along Terry Street over by the school, and thinking about how it might look, and how we layer in things like wayfinding, placemaking elements, sustainable trail design, and building on safe routes to school and complete streets approaches to how crossings get designed and other elements of the trails and pathways. And so we'll use this to build support as well as the next phases, where we'll move into engineering and environmental design, and just working more technically with developing plan sets for permitting and more detailed cost estimates, moving into construction with bid documents and construction administration. And then lastly,
we're at about 2 minutes left, I think.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. As
Blake mentioned, we measure success in terms of smiles, how the trail is used as a part of daily life. We see that as our kind of success and kind of standard for measuring the projects that we work on. And so that finishes this portion of our presentation, and we would love to talk to you about what success means for you all related to trails, and answer any other questions that you might have about our team and our approach.
Great, thank you very much. Greg?
You
Going to start
first.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. See, I'm absolutely.
He's getting bored with me
asking,
asking the same questions. So the way we're going to do this is we agreed on a set of like 2 questions that we all agreed on, and then individual council members will ask questions. But actually, just a gating thing, which is who would be the key contact person or persons to work with our staff?
It would be myself. I would
Okay.
be managing the contract, and then Blake would be the technical contact as well. And so the two of us would work together. So depending on the particular task, the two of us would be
All right. Thank
working
you.
with you all.
So our questions actually take off on what I just saw as your phase 2 corridor design. So the first is, what would you identify as 3 innovative features that are imperative to a successful and well-used pathway facility? And maybe with particular reference to Terry Street, if you might, because that's
for
what you
sure.
had shown up there.
Blake, do you want to kind of go into some of that?
So three innovative things to think about.
Or if you had 4, if you had 2, it's okay.
Yeah, no. Well, I really want to make sure that I hit home just a couple of points. And
Right.
one would be sustainability and understanding stormwater management, and understanding what
Right,
happens
okay.
during a flooding event.
Right.
That kind of leads into the plant selection that we could use, the sustainability of using native vegetation. As a trail user, I
Right.
will tell you that safety is the #1 concern. How do we handle each intersection crossing is what is critical. But again, it all goes back to thinking about who are your main users, who do you want them to be, how do you want them to feel at the end of the day. My final innovative approach, I guess, would have to be wayfinding, and would be how do you integrate it? Is it just a visual wayfinding? Is it the walk-up kiosk that you can understand? where my 8-year-old son can go, oh, come on, Dad, it's only this far. That's only a 2-minute bike ride into town to get an ice cream. Do you want it to be the QR code? How do we make sure that we're innovative enough that we're ahead of technology, but we're not waiting on the next fad to end, sort of thing? And the wayfinding is important because that's economic development, that's your tax returns, that's your hospitality return, that's how you encourage small business to grow. I mean, that's where wayfinding comes into play, and that's the major component of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next one is actually 3 parts.
Great. I'll write them down.
Yeah. What are and it relates to challenges, particularly in an urban environment, which is what we have in town here. We have some suburban, we have urban, but a place like Terry Street obviously is more urban. What are unique challenges that you would anticipate would directly impact multimodal path design and implementation within the city? What are some of your initial concepts for addressing these challenges? And what past experience has your firm had to overcome similar challenges?
Well, you know, I would say one of the challenges is, you know, starts with the community. It's creating buy-in and support. And, you know, the process that we typically use is the charrette process. It's very bottom-up. It's consensus building. It's identifying specific issues that the community may know that we don't necessarily pick up on. You know, does the push button not work at a particular intersection at a certain time of day that makes it difficult to cross, or are there sight lines that, you know, make it difficult for you know, a mom and kids to cross because they don't feel safe because they can't see cars coming. And so our process is meant to build momentum and kind of identify those things early on in the process. So you don't just come back with a design and we miss all those you know, things. And then, you know, as you mentioned, you know, there's a cross section of different types of contexts in the community, and maybe there are different neighborhoods that have different needs. And so, you know, working through that to make sure that there's buy-in and that the investment that you all are going to make in a trail kind of meets the needs of everyone along the particular corridor. I would also build on what Blake said in terms of safety. Florida is the most dangerous state to walk and bike in the country. And, you know, I'm sure you all saw the Dangerous by Design report that was released recently that kind of noted that Fort Myers, Cape Coral, you know, Lee County area was the most dangerous metropolitan area in the country. And so it's critical that safety be integrated. And, you know, it's about when you get to the edge of your neighborhood, does that street outside, is it a barrier or is it a connector? Can people get from Terry Street to Old 41 and, you know, down here to and then down to kind of the commercial area and the places that you all are trying to build? Do they feel safe and comfortable doing so? And that's going to be a big focus for us. And then I don't know if there are any others. Mike, if you want to talk about maybe some of the constructability components.
So I'm the engineer, so I'm used to dealing with the field issues, and they're near and dear to my heart, specifically the Wolf River Greenway, which is a 23 urban greenway, and it has side paths. It goes through the woods and spots, but there are so many challenges with an urban greenway. I think the biggest one we've had is property issues. Knowing how we going to fit this greenway or side path in with the available room we have. And if we're able to get easements that are needed to facilitate the design of what we're thinking, and having backups. I had a phase where a property owner was dead set, refused to give us a greenway easement, so we had to go on road with a different segment. Having those type of thoughts in your head as we're designing it, so you don't say, okay, oh no, what are we going to do? We're back to 6 months of planning, figuring out how we're going to get this thing built. Utilities, how it interfaces with the properties, and also ADA. I know a lot of areas are flat, but ADA design has gotten a lot tougher with all the ADA laws. We're still operating in 1990 ADA, which is extremely stringent. So getting your sidewalk ramps, how they operate when they interface with the intersection. And then the last thing I would talk about is the intersections themselves. Blake is 100% right. If you have a roadway crossing that is dangerous and people don't feel safe crossing it, they're just not going to use it. So we got to use everything in our toolbox to make a safe crossing for the 8 to 80.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, very good. Greg, you're up.
I'm up. I'll take it this time.
Okay.
You guys had some good ideas about when you're using your priorities and who's using the trail. I guess my question is what we're looking for also from a company is to look at the whole entire city of Bonita Springs and help us prioritize where we're going to put our money first. How are you guys going to go with that approach?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, that is a big part of what we do every day. We just wrapped up the City of Cape Coral's bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and a big component of that was prioritizing where they needed to make their investments first. And so we integrated a scoring criteria for their projects and scored all of their projects for walking, for biking, for trails. And we worked with the community and the stakeholder committee to establish what that scoring criteria would be. And that was a master planning effort. And so, for this effort, there might be some additional technical components that we can integrate into a scoring criteria, such as availability of funding, are there right-of-way or utility, components. But we can work with you all to establish what those priorities are for you. As I mentioned, that developing that design palette, it's also about working with you all to figure out what those priorities are. So maybe it's safety, so we can map safety where crashes occur in the community and use that in with mapping as a scoring criteria. Or another thing that we did, like in Cape Coral, we looked at proximity to schools or to other destinations such as parks. And then in that way too, we can also start to build in where you're going to generate the most use relative to your investment, so you can get a good return on your investment.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Amy?
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yep.
Fred?
What, do you think it's possible that you could develop a theme, like you say, that would be used on Terry Street, but then if we eventually do something on Beach Road, or even though that's complicated because that's Lee County owns the road and I guess the dirt under it, and likewise Hickory Boulevard, but all this stuff is in Bonita Springs, and is it possible to come up with something that, even though it's not identical, it's part of the same theme?
Definitely, and I'll make a few notes, and then I'll see if anyone else wants to say anything. But as part of the Lee County Tiger Grant project, they had some money left over, and so we were brought back into the project by the Lee County MPO to develop a wayfinding package. And part of the focus on the wayfinding package was that it could be regionally flexible. So there would be components that you could identify with no matter where you are biking in Lee County. And so there's a tourism and economic development component, but there are also flexible design elements to it, so that you all in Bonita Springs might want to modify it in the same way that Cape Coral wants to have their own unique brand. And so we do that with lots of our projects. And I would also say too, a lot of communities are developing with trails or with on-street facilities, particularly for bike boulevards, which are kind of like low stress routes, where they will brand them for a particular neighborhood. So they might get a particular emblem on top of a sign or something that makes it unique. You're riding along the XYZ neighborhood trail connector. So we can definitely do that. And Blake, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I will only add that this is your community, and all of the ideas that are there for that big idea or that spine Greenway, they already exist. Because at the end of the day, I still go home to my small town of 1,000 people, and you have to be the ones that buy into it and understand it so that you can sell it for the next section, for the next piece, for the next development that comes, for the next small business that wants to locate near it. You're going to have to be the one that sells that idea. So our job is really just to extract all the information from you, package it together, and then show you this is what you already have and what you can build on. Now, let us go and do and build it and make it successful, because that's what we get to do for a living, and we're super proud to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. Fred? Anything else? Mike?
Yeah, this is going to be our first path, so it's kind of going to be our signature one that we want to base off everything on. But we're kind of looking for cutting edge, new technologies, materials. What kind of examples can you give to that effect?
I would give one example, and you guys can chime in on any others, but right now we're working on a trail project in the Coachella Valley in California. And, there, in addition to integrating a lot of, sustainable design elements such as, solar panels to power lighting, it's a big, long, linear trail that's going to connect multiple communities. There's a wayfinding and branding component to it as well. It also includes electric vehicle component to it, which is unique and different. And how do you deal with trail users that are as diverse as people walking to people skateboarding, biking to having electric vehicles, like golf carts on the trail as well. And how does that interface effectively with the on-street facility as well? And so it was the first of its kind in California in terms of integrating, all those different users and technologies. And so a lot of times when we're working on projects, it's the first in a particular community. And so, we would love the opportunity to be able to work with you all to figure out what it is that you all need and build that. And do you guys have anything else in terms of?
So, you're going to hit me for this, so I'm going to think it like in LA now. Bear with me. So this is where the Plus Design, which we call it Alta, is so important, is because the LA and engineer are married together. So it's up to Blake to come up with the fancy paving patterns and the kinetic art sculptures and other items that really make it unique for their signature trail. And it's up to me to design them for the things like pervious asphalts or concretes. And that's really what Blake's job is really to come up with that artistic sense of what this trail can be, and then the engineer's job to put his fantasy into reality. So.
And I would also add to, one of the things that makes us unique is that, particularly for trails, they just need to be designed really well. So you may not necessarily need a fancy crossing treatment. You just may need to have a really well-designed one. And we're able to kind of vet that and also be creative in terms of our designs if it requires something that is unique for the particular trail. So, yeah. Does that answer your question, or do you have any others?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Good. Steve? Good. You're good? Okay. I guess you're actually probably on the slide. I've been focusing a lot today on, I guess, safety, obviously, that rides. But you had showed this slide, and that's out in front of the middle school or thereabouts. What are you anticipating, either from the center line or from the white line, to where it would move over for the trail? How many feet, I guess, is what I'm trying to spit out here. Right. What do you see, and then how many spots along Terry Street do you find that's going to be a challenge or not a challenge?
Yeah. Well, I'd probably lean on our designers to talk about that. I mean, it varies along the
Understood.
corridor,
Oh, sure, for sure.
You know.
At your most extreme example, what do you see would be problematic?
No, absolutely. So AASHTO guidelines call for 11-foot minimum of our pathway design. So we know that right here from the center, that's going to be 5.5 feet over. I know that AASHTO guidelines will also tell me that there needs to be a recovery zone based on your design speed of your greenway. So let's say 17 miles an hour, which is moving fairly fast through there. But we know that there needs to be a couple of feet of recovery room. That's not so much for the speed as much as it is the recovery, again, of my 8-year-old or my 80-year-old grandmother walking down that. That is exactly what that is for. Any stormwater areas that would need to be concerned over here or on this side, we'll add a couple more feet in that area, so we could call that 3 feet fairly easily. So we went from 5.5 to 5.5 to 8.5 to 11.5. times 2, so we're looking at 23 feet of total area minimum needed through here, with a maximum of about 30 feet through there. We drove the corridor multiple times. I know that Brad and Brian came down here and looked at it as well. There are utility constraints that exist along through there as you get closer to the railroad track. As we think about that crossing, it does look to be abandoned, but we'll need to think about how that crossing works. So there's another area where it pinches down, as well as the bridge crossing over the interstate. So we have to think about how that constraint happens. And then also being on the other side of the road, as far as the YMCA in that area. So we're talking about switching sides of roads, which is one major constraint, utility constraints, and then the 2 large infrastructure, the highway and the railroad in that area. Those are the constraints that I see immediately, and that's looking at it, that's the out-of-state perspective, looking at it really fast. Brad may can offer some more details about the specificity of those.
Yeah, Jim.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Council? Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Council, why don't we reconvene at 2:45 or 2:50? What's your pleasure? 2:45. 2:45 it is.
Ready, break. And they are playing cards.
Yeah. He got the word about an hour ago or whatever. He didn't. He and I communicate via Twitter. Heck did the picture himself. So, most recently, as of yesterday, wishing each other happy Father's Day. But I mean, he's
What about the glasses?
God bless him. You know, it's just fun for
okay.
a fan like me.
They were laying right here. I thought, what the hell were these for?
I wish I could remember some.
And I
crazy
saw
things
they
going
were
on in
green
New
on
Hampshire.
the inside.
Sports-wise, but
It's
it
got to
was
be
something else that
belong
was
to a
going on.
woman. I showed him. Mike said, well, maybe it belongs to Debbie. And then you walked in. Jesus.
I'll tell you what. I was looking at number 2, but these blew everybody away.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough based on what.
They work for Lee County. They're from Palm Beach. Lee County's coming down with a patch, right? Trail. Lee County's putting a trail in.
When did you email me?
Oh, yeah.
Dad's Father's Day yesterday. So.
Yeah.
They're gonna build a library in Bonita. 17 years ago.
Some people have good writing skills. Better writing skills.
Will anything from today's meeting be posted?
No, but I'd like to get a ham and cheese or a turkey and cheese sandwich to go.
A sack of money about this big.
18 months to get this federal grant. Yeah, sure.
Call me or get to my office if you don't get me answers time.
Make it a toll. I never heard of
Not good.
Well, last, I don't know what I told you, but the last time she was the third incident, she tripped over a wall, fell down 5 flights of stairs, and my son was there, saw the whole thing. She wrote to tell us. the hospital. And she goes, the doctor goes, okay, how did this happen?
And you saw the other email.
What's 2:30 is fine.
Husband tried to
Apparently it's probably waiting for
one of the old
schedule. I gave Leah, yeah, but we have Jay and John available.
police, son is smart enough to say, Doc, we need to tell them the whole story. And,
So you missed the,
so anyway,
Oh, that was a lot of fun.
and I,
Yeah. Friday, Zion, we went through a bunch of some other ones. We also went to Miami Valley. We went to Miami, it's not National Park, but Miami Valley.
she's been there for,
No,
this is her
where's
last
that?
week.
It's Cedar Breaks is in between.
And Friday night, my husband, her
You know, we
husband
went
said,
through, wasn't Cedar Breaks, but another one outside of,
can't trust her, you know, and with
it's a mine, we went through another mine outside of Rice.
you know,
Which just the road to get there was fun.
so I guess the settlement,
I mean,
gonna
it's
give her
like,
$500,000. Two buildings that they own. And so she's gonna get one apartment free, doesn't have to pay a dime.
Oh.
He's gonna give her a card. He says, I'm afraid to give her a card, but she's gotta go somewhere.
Yeah, well,
It's just.
the problem is it's old, isn't it?
No, like yesterday.
He's gonna do custody of the kids.
Right.
Oh, he's definitely.
We got $50 million, we got to spend it.
As a courtesy.
That's just one thing that, you know.
Right.
He leaves, yeah.
A little awkward.
Yeah, I know, I got him. I know that,
She was putting everything together, you know, and now I don't
did
know.
a resolution.
This all started like 4 years ago, that she started.
Oh, okay.
bulimic.
No big
Liz
deal.
also,
Started to lose weight.
odds are, odds are.
Thanks, no problem.
Right.
There's no shots out, you can't cheat.
Matt, oh, did you get a cookie?
I think we should do it for Wednesday.
You know, and then after a while, you know,
Why not? The old seminar here. I mean, I was thinking in my head if Peter wasn't here. I don't know, but Peter's here.
but you know what, it's really.
Yeah.
She doesn't realize it.
Well, listen, you're good.
Dave.
But, you know, she said, hopefully this.
Oh, is that right?
6 weeks.
I didn't errata sheet. Oh, you saw it.
And, she has.
Yeah, my mother-in-law is memorial service design for that for me. so.
July 5th.
Mr.
No, it's not
Thuriak-
on the 5th.
Mr.
but-
Thuriak will be appearing telephonically.
Yeah, I'm not setting him down.
No, appearing. Through the phone. It's, I'm just, they brought you. I'm not even gonna read it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this the right way and accept.
See stuff like that, it's a.
There you go. They don't need that. What did I accept?
Yeah.
Well, one thing I don't
As long as the grandkids
one
are
of the
taken care
questions
of,
I
and,
had today
and hopefully your daughter, you know.
The development agreement is a development.
better.
It's not.
Husband's
They have to come into development.
writing all this stuff. I don't know why. Started taking care of the grandchildren. She lives in Pittsburgh. And so then every, so often she has to come. My wife is and use 3 weeks, so then goes down there for 3 weeks, takes care of the kids. And she comes back. She lives mother-in-law loves to be there with the kids, so 3 weeks, she's got.
Push for drawbridge, I mean, a soldier.
So works in Pittsburgh, he's an electrical engineer, and she's such a mess.
It's not as strict.
Terry, and she's like here, financial.
Thank you.
And thank you. She told me.
Hey, you're welcome.
She said she
Build on it, when that's been decided before it started.
Let me tell you something. I came from Minnesota. Everybody comes
Cape Coral. Sanibel, you got $6.
Fred, you dropped one.
Oh, I know, it went under
I got love under my chair.
Like the more you talk, so this and you realize, yeah. Ed saved my life. I couldn't come to meeting. She was so.
How's AJ doing? Feeling, oh, did he go back? When did he go? A week or two ago?
I've never did down to 3.
I got my top 3. I got 3.
But I don't know what
Lean's
order.
husband was a deacon in the church.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. What do we think? It's 2:40, it's 2:45, yeah.
We don't think after that hour.
It's 2:45 at least. Seat is warm, Mikey, by the way. Jeez.
Long way at the top.
Yeah.
I didn't make it, who made it? Oh, wow. How sweet. That was 06?
Fred over there talking about food again.
Yeah,
Right, what's
what's
the
that?
cashew pack?
I know, it's been sitting there since the last.
It's gonna get rotated around. You can have it for a couple months until next meeting.
Arlene and Matt, did you want to kick us off here, or do you want me to kick us off? Because I have some thoughts as well, but I think maybe we should start with
No,
you.
it might be helpful for you to have some general discussion on and come to some kind of consensus, and then we're happy to hear to provide any guidance, or if you would like our suggestions or comments after there's a general council discussion.
Right. And I just want to say a few things. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Compared to presentations from years past, or holy cow, the disparity is much smaller with these presentations that I saw today. In my humble opinion, I kept kind of bouncing around, which was good, because where I would be kind of in one box, maybe in other presentations, I kept saying, okay, design versus experience versus local projects versus, and which generally doesn't enter the equation, but fundraising experience and capability based on these. I'm like, wow. So then I kind of put experience and local projects kind of as, yes, they're important, but maybe second tier, and then which got me right back to design and fundraising experience and capability. So whether that helps or hinders, I just kind of was bouncing between those 4 places, but then really kind of getting down to design and fundraising experience and capability. So, yeah, Fred.
Well, I think, in my opinion, the very best one was the last one we heard. Now, the thing it's, and the getting the who would be number 2 is tougher, but in all honesty, I ruled out the very first one because, my God, that's a huge team. You notice the ones that were the better had the smaller teams. I actually picked the second one we heard this morning as a number 2. It was tough. The other guy that was headquarters in Fort Myers, I think he's a strong 3. But, I mean, after that, it's just a big blur.
For what it's, I would agree with, I actually had the same ranking that Fred had, but I think it's important to say, because it's true, that they were all quality presentations. I mean, I learned a lot today from listening, and right from the top, from the structure point to Jones as well, and Stan, all quality outfits. But I felt that, the design part to me is the biggest part of it, and in that context, it was Alta and Sprinkle. I frankly also felt that, it's a shame that Sprinkle didn't have the fellow who would have been the primary contact person here today, because who knows which way that would have cut, but we don't have the benefit of that. So I actually ended up where you did, E and B.
Okay. Mike?
I actually was Sprinkle 1, Stantec 2, and Alta 3, based on presentations and also, reading ahead of time. I felt Sprinkle had a great presentation. Kind of checked all the boxes off on the list when they were going down it. As far as even the outside funding, they were actually the first to mention that out of the other ones. And also the early resident outreach, because as we know, looking at the power line thing, there's a lot of resistance there. So to me, they kind of really stood out. And then followed by Stantec, also checked pretty much the same boxes, being able to leverage the money to get grants, and then just other projects, and especially the newer technologies like the Flexi Pave and the motion activated lighting. So that we're not paying for lights all the time, and residents aren't going to be bothered by lights if there's nobody using the path. So.
Okay, Audrey?
I hate to interrupt you, Councilmember Gibson, but I didn't write which ones you put 1, 2, and 3. Could you just?
Sprinkle was my number 1, Stantec 2, and Alta 3.
Hey, we're not really
voting here.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
But
we're having a discussion.
But we're good for now. Steve?
I originally was gonna go with Sprinkle as number 1, but until Alta came on board, and then I switched and I said, well, Alta's number 1 in my opinion, Sprinkle's 2.
Microphone up there?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Rick, sorry.
Okay. Greg?
I don't know. I guess I missed the boat somewhere on Sprinkle. To be honest, I wasn't that impressed with them. I mean, it had a few good ideas, and kind of back to like Mike's question, they gave us no wow factor. I thought the presentation was very generic, especially with the people they had on board with McMahon and Associates. I would have figured they would have walked in with, hey, here's the Bonita Springs, and here's what we're going to do. And I got nothing out of it. I mean, I took notes on every one of them, and then you guys are welcome to them since they are public record now. But I mean, they had some positive things. I mean, talking to the city's safety plans, points of interest, very good on that part of it. But, nothing specific, very general, I wrote down. A lot of what I put on the positive things are they do work with McMahon, but, to me, they talked a lot about themselves, not about what they're going to do for Bonita, in my opinion. I mean, these are the things I wrote down. So with that being said, I put them and who was the other one? The David one.
David Jones.
David Jones. I put those two as I guess my final two. I liked Alta and Stantec probably the best. The one out of Indianapolis, I thought did good. I thought they did their homework. Originally, I had them as probably 2, but probably they jumped down to 3 when we got Alta. I mean, I think they did their homework. I thought their presentation was good. They showed us what they thought, what we thought was going to
Which
be our
one's that?
first project,
Alta.
the very first one.
No, you mean Structure Point?
Structure Point.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, American Structure Point.
From Indianapolis, right, the first
From
one.
Indianapolis, the
Yep.
first one. I put on there, they did their homework. They did some of the stuff on East Terry. They talked about a priority. Some of their negatives, like we talked about, is, they're out of Indiana. So it may be a problem with their director or whatever. But, Southwest does not stop from here to Indianapolis, so they can be here in 2 hours, 3 hours if we need them to be here. So I guess my thing would be, I can go either way with Stantec or Alta as 1 or 2, and then third one being American. So, those 3. The other thing I didn't like, especially about the David Jones, is 70% of their stuff was outside, and kind of the same thing. This is with Sprinkle, 40% of their stuff is outside consulting. You know what I mean?
Oh.
If they're on both of them. If they're going to use McMahon, then why are we paying him? Let's just go to McMahon. And on the David one, David Jones, they kept talking about tool design. We've already done that. So why pay the pass-through money? We'll just go to the tool design, or we'll just go to McMahon and Associates. Because I think originally Councilman Forbes said that a couple of these we expected them to do a presentation for us, and they never did it. So those are the other reasons why I'm kind of shying away from those 2, personally.
Great, thanks. Amy?
Well, I'm so glad for this discussion, because I I think, three of the ones that we
Microphone, please.
I said I'm very glad for the discussion, but I was interested in the three that you mentioned, Alta, Stantec, and Sprinkle. And I think what I'm going to do is favor Alta for this reason, which I'm not sure is relevant or not, but it might be good to have someone that's totally different than the other, like Toll and McMahon, because we already have them working on various projects. And I'm sure that they would Alta could coordinate with either one of those other consultants so that we could, get going with a totally, like a third consultant that had a different perspective. But I think if I were to order that, I like Sprinkle a lot, so I would do Alta and then Sprinkle and then Stantec if we were going to a three.
I think we're all more or less in the same ballpark. Nothing against American, because I was very impressed when I heard them. They were first, right? And then I'm like, well, okay. And then I heard Sprinkle. I'm like, I like that one a little bit better. I did what Fred said. As I went, I kind of, okay, who's one, who's two, I did that. But then by the time, actually, I was very impressed with David Jones. I was impressed with Stantec, and I was impressed with Alta. So believe it or not, I might be the one that would put Alta either just in the top three, but not necessarily at the top. But I think we wouldn't have too many difficulties up here ranking 1, 2, and 3. And I don't know if that's too broad at this point, but I think our 1, 2, and 3, we'd be pretty happy based on what I've heard here. I think we're all pretty much in agreement. And I hate to say I would eliminate American, and that's nothing against them. They did their homework. I heard that said. And this was very, a lot closer than I remember presentations in the past in terms of what I heard. And I get back to this funding thing. I hate to say it. Boys, some of them seem to have a lot of experience with the design, yes, of course, but really hammering in on some fundraising. So,
well, I would think that the ones who work most intensely in this area would be way up the learning curve. Not to say the others aren't, on how the funding works.
Right.
And that's why you saw Alta talk about it specifically, and I think Sprinkle was the other one that actually had a whole slide with potential things. That's a huge thing for us generally. Having said that, I think Tiger Grant's going away, at least if the administration gets what it wants. And it's a shame that 2.1%, when I first saw it, I thought it said 21. I said, wow, 2.1% is going to get lower, not higher, out of the federal government.
Audrey.
Unfortunately.
Excuse me.
Yes, Steve. Or Audrey, go ahead.
Thanks. I just, and I'm reading from statute here, and I just want to go through, because Amy said, is this correct way? And the answer to your question as far as willingness to meet budget, and I think that was your question, or no, distribution of contracts. I want to read from the statute what you're supposed to look at for competitive selection. I think you're all on board, but I just want to make sure you're very aware of it. To determine whether a firm is qualified, the agency shall consider such factors as the ability of professional personnel, whether a firm is a certified minority business enterprise, past performance, willingness to meet time and budget requirements, location, recent, current, and projected workloads of the firms, volume of work previously awarded to each firm by the agency with the object of effecting an equitable distribution of contracts among qualified firms, provided the distribution does not violate principles of selection of the most highly qualified firm. And then compensation is only during the competitive negotiation, but as I read before, willingness to meet budget and to assist in that, I see as being clear game. Or fair game.
Audrey, would it be legally okay to ask Matt for his opinion?
Absolutely. Input from staff makes sense.
Sure.
Sure.
Matt?
How about Arlene, her too?
And then Arlene. Matt, then Arlene.
Well, I think if you want just me to name the firms I would shortlist.
Yes.
I would say in this order: Alta, Sprinkle, and then Stantec. And I think that out of them all, Alta really probably spoke at the micro scale in terms of the project that City Council had kind of identified. They done their homework as some of the other firms have done, but they also address the larger picture in terms of innovation and experience across the country. I think to that end, Sprinkle did a good job of showing, their broader reach and their broader experience as well. And I think that they would have some creative ideas. But I think honestly, Alta really kind of, to me, represented that whole package. Stantec did, but I think the folks that articulated up here really were more directly involved in the metro Atlanta area and then here locally. And I've worked with the two firms, all of those folks, other than really Alta, but I think that they most specifically addressed, I think, what we were looking for in terms of this project, to be able to give us broad ideas. I like the idea of a manual. It was articulated, that Alta articulated, and then taking it down all the way to the project level. So I think they hit those salient points the most cogently.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Arlene?
Similar to Matt, except, Alta was, in looking at it, they have, when we're looking at world-renowned, state-of-the-art, they are the industry standard, and you can see that several communities, groups, and publications are all looking to them. So I think they understand what we're looking for, this world-class facility. It sounded from some of the answers that they took that you can create that sense of place with not necessarily having that same dollar value. The expense, too much expense. There's using ways to create it, to actually build the structure to create that feeling and that safe haven sense. American Structure Point did a lot of research, seemed very enthusiastic. Right. I just felt there was a little bit more depth in the resources that were provided by Sprinkle and Stantec. I was very impressed by Stantec's answers to our key features. I know we had one group that mentioned that it needs to be concrete or asphalt, but I was interested to hear about the flex materials and different innovations out there, and I think that they brought a lot to the table in interesting design. I just think there might be a little bit slight more depth in the Sprinkle, but I'm really very close with Stantec and Sprinkle with different pluses and minuses at
For
each.
2 and 3.
Yes.
So we did pretty good then, huh?
Yeah. Well, what have we decided?
Council, what's your pleasure?
Well, what do we do technically, Audrey, here? We make a recommendation to the city council of Bonita
Well,
Springs?
you are city council. That would be a little bit difficult.
Let's make a recommendation to city council. Yes, let's do that.
So
Where would
let's make
they-
it a little bit easier.
When do they meet?
City council, okay, boys, watch. City council is meeting as the selection committee pursuant to statute. City council at this time can entertain a vote. If you do entertain a vote, your notice of intent to award would be approved and ratified at probably as a walk-on at your next meeting, would be my recommendation, if staff's okay with it.
We're open to discussion whether you'd like it to be a walk-on to this coming meeting or if you'd like us to place it on a subsequent
Well, why
agenda.
wouldn't it be the next meeting?
The only reason I would say a walk-on to the next one,
Get
and I'm not
done.
trying to predetermine July 5th, but July 5th may or may not happen.
Because we're not going to be here.
Right.
Oh.
So, which would make it a month, but whatever,
Well, why not get it done, right?
Yeah, get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, next one.
So at this time, what you would be doing is a note, you would be advising notice of intent as your 3 rankings, and then you would confirm those rankings, as you said, as city council. You could probably technically do that today, but I think how it was advertised, I'm not sure.
Wouldn't it be better to do it today since it's fresh in their mind?
Well, you
You're
would
gonna
be.
do it, you're just technical.
You would be, you'd just ratify your
You would-
decision.
Yeah,
you'd
ratified
be
and
ratifying
formally
in
in
the-
something.
Okay.
Well, I
But
would
that
sug-
way, the presenters would be allowed to receive a notice of intent. It could be faxed to them or emailed, I guess, old data, emailed to them so that they're aware that your decision would be made on that, and this is how you've ranked them.
We want to rank the top 3, or do we want to rank all 5?
Well, top 3.
I think,
Top 3,
I think
but
you're
I'd-
fine with the top 3.
I would suggest Alta, Sprinkle, and Stantec in that order.
I second that.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm close, but I'm not right there, but I'm close, is what I'm saying. But I'm
Can I-
close to what you said, but,
Before
yeah,
we
yeah,
vote,
Fred.
can I make a,
No, which is all good. I
outside the
think this is a
box-
great problem to have.
An outside.
It really is.
May I make an outside the
Yes.
box suggestion? You might make Alta number 1 and Sprinkle and Sandtech tied for second place.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good
I'll
idea.
tell you what.
I would
that-
amend my motion.
Yeah. What that would mean.
I'll second your
I wanted
amendment.
to tell you
Would
what
that
it meant.
create a problem, excuse me, would that create a
Well,
problem if
no,
you
here's
don't
what-
come
Hang
to
on
it-
just 1 second,
It
Amy,
would
and then,
mean-
yeah.
It would mean that if we can't arrive at a fair and equal price negotiation with Alta, then whoever does the thing would call in the other two, and guess what? You'd be deciding it based on fee.
Okay, Amy, I'm sorry. I
Well,
just
that
wanted
was
to-
my,
Yeah.
I thought what he proposed would not be workable, and I'm not sure you want to do it on fee anyway, but
Well, that's what would happen if you got them tied, because the only way to break the
what's the
tie-
advantage of
Well,
tying them?
wait, I'm sorry.
What's the advantage of,
That's legal.
of putting them forward on a tie basis? What does that accomplish?
It wouldn't.
Because we
If
can't
we
decide
can't-
twos, 2 and 3?
It would-
Okay, what,
It would only mean that we can't decide between which one's better of the two for number 2.
Let's be frank, it helps in negotiations, right?
I think that's the objective of what Commissioner or Councilman Forbes is suggesting, because the statute has competitive negotiation, and if you're not able to enter a satisfactory contract with the firm most qualified at a price the agency determines to be fair, competitive, and reasonable, you terminate it with that. Now, it says that the agency shall then undertake negotiations with the second most qualified firm. And then failing accord with the second most qualified firm, the agency must terminate negotiations. And then with the third most qualified. I think even ranking them 1 and 2, I mean, ranking 1 as 1 and 2 as 2 different firms, you're still going to be in another day where you're going to need to take those 2 firms and figure out which one you want first and which one you want third. I mean, third and second.
Ohio Supreme Court and Ohio Court of Appeals and Ohio Regular Court said that if you have a tie, you can break the tie by a fee proposal. But I don't know if that would hold up in Florida.
And I don't know how their statute reads compared to our
Same-
statute. I'd have,
Exactly the same.
does it? And I know ours has been amended about 50 times, but I would have to research that to see if that's a legal possibility, although it would be nice just to have a contract with your number 1 ranked firm.
I'm not pushing for that. If I could vote for,
Well, do we would just want to do, all right, number 1, Alta.
Right.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
You got it.
Oh,
Mike?
Mayor.
Kind of like,
I'm close, but I mean, I'm
Yeah,
not saying no.
I think it was more of they went last, and so after seeing everybody else, I was like really waiting for something even bigger and better. And,
Right.
Right,
and
right,
I
right,
just
right.
felt a little disappointed, with their presentation. So I think that's why I put them at 3, and I had a hard time deciding between Sprinkle and Stantec for 1, 2. So. But Alta did have a lot of good points, and I think I was just underwhelmed on the presentation. So, but I could go with them as 1.
Okay, we got that.
Do we need a vote for just on the one?
well, I'm just saying, then we can debate 2 with whether it's Sprinkle or Sandtex or whoever else
So I
someone's
would
got.
amend my motion to just focus on number 1, as Greg suggested, and suggested that would be Alta.
Mayor? I'll second
Second.
that for discussion.
No, that's, and then, I was gonna say, I still like the motion though for the 2 second places, but. Well, yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so for Alta first,
Roll on this, so do we do a vote? Okay.
Aye. We'll just go
yeah,
down.
I'm sorry, yeah, roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilman Slackton?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Corumba?
Aye.
There's been a motion in a second, right? No, I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't
we
spit
did
that
it
out
right.
ahead of that,
And
yes.
everything you do today will be ratified
Right.
by, at the June 21st.
By the city council, oh, that's great.
Oh, stop it.
Here they're a good group of guys, I hear.
And women.
Excuse me. Okay.
Okay, tell you what, seeing how I'm somewhere in between, the days between, or whatever they call it, would like to make a motion for Sprinkle and, I guess this, yeah, no, I know, but I'm right there with David Jones, so, I was going to jump in there on you, Fred, and throw in David Jones, but I won't do that with Sprinkle and Stantec for, move them forward as 2 and 2. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
So
Been a mo-
Audrey, you're okay with that? What do you want to think about?
Well, right now, I'm okay with it. If you're able to negotiate with number 1, I need to do additional research if negotiations with number 1 fail. But
Okay, all right, then.
That sounds good. I mean, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We're still at these
No
last
pun
two, so.
intended.
Right, yeah, right, exactly.
We'll cross that multimodal path when we get to
When
it.
we get to
I had to go there.
We're all, oh, God, we're punchy.
Yes, Matt.
Matt.
I just kind of had a question for Audrey. If it proves that you can't in Florida rank 2 and 2, like was suggested, would that, in assuming that you didn't come to an agreement with number 1, because that's the first assumption, does that nullify the work that's been done here today?
No.
Or can they can decide between the dually ranked number 2s and figure out who?
I think they just have to come to a hard, I have to first see if the Ohio law relates to Florida, but assuming, or if there's a comparable Florida case on point that says yay or nay to the Ohio case, but I would think that at that point, council would have to make the hard decision of revising your rankings. Yeah, because I don't see something where you can do a deal split with the second most qualified based on my read of the statute. But it doesn't mean if Ohio has the same statute, and again, I need to take a look at that.
I know there's a motion on the floor, but can't we go ahead with a 2 and 3 ranking, or nobody?
We could do that if you wanted, but the suggestion is,
Yeah, I don't care.
Well,
you don't care?
I'll go along with what everybody wants to do.
Question real quick, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I guess either to Audrey or Matt or to Arlene. I guess the question would be, what would, when you go negotiate with Alta, what's going to, like, stop us in the track? You know, we're not going to follow up. I mean, we talking $1 million here, or do we have a set budget? And if they won't come to the scope of work with that set budget, is that the only thing standing in Alta getting the job?
The negotiated, you know, and Arlene can chime in, but something like this is really just based on their fees. It's a fee schedule. You know, the work is generated as you move forward in what you task them to do, right? There are many different things that you can task them to do. So it's really, it's a negotiation on whether that fee schedule is in line with commensurate professional services of that caliber. And so that, to answer your question, yes, if it were some astronomically kind of out of whack number in terms of a fee schedule, because it's not going to be a fixed price. It's not a lump. You're not bidding this work like a contract out for bid.
Right. That's kind of my question. So I mean,
it's just whether
so
their
it's not
professional
really.
fees are
there's
are
probably
very
no
far
reason
out.
I get.
Right.
Do we
Knocked
have,
out.
excuse me, do we have any idea what the fee schedules are? I mean, do we have?
No, you-
You know, we have comparative engineering firms. Now, granted, they're not nationally ranked bicycle firms. I think we'd probably look at some of the recent work on Bonita Beach Road to do some of that analysis. So we have resources to turn to. Do I know it off the top of my head? No, I don't have a number in my head.
We'd also have discussions on preparing the actual scope of work of the contract and making sure that's meeting our needs as well, and we would bring all those items back to the council for a final decision. That scope is matching what our needs are to be that consultant to us and ranking these prioritizations, because this scope was not to actually go out and construct any project, so we've got to make sure they fully understand that too.
You know, Fred, I'm just wondering, I know you've said you don't care, but just in deference to your point, if this were a big, like, you know, $800,000, $1 million contract, that'd be one thing, but it's not that. So I'm,
Chances are.
yeah, so I'm wondering
that
if we
the
just go
fee
with a
is not-
normal.
Is going to be fair and reasonable.
Right. So I'm just wondering if we should just go to a more normal ranking of 2 and 3.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't.
Yep.
I-
Is that all right?
I only brought that up to tell you what's
Well-
good.
Oh, okay.
We have the motion on the floor, so we have to
Right.
either.
Who made the motion?
I made the motion to have the ranking 2 and 2, but I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
Fred?
Well, I'll make a motion then that we go with,
Sprinkle.
I still think Sprinkle's 2, but why don't we show our hands to see who's 2, Sprinkle or Santec?
Sprinkle.
Sprinkle.
Sprinkle. Okay. Or
All right,
David
then I
Jones.
make a motion,
What are you-
sprinkle is rated 2 and
Oh, he's
Sandtech
Sandtech.
3.
All right, second motion.
Okay. It's been a motion and a second to have Sprinkle move forward as the number 2 recommendation and Stantec at number 3. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Boy, David Jones.
That's all right.
The
mayor did it.
You're never gonna get down there anyways.
Let's hope not.
So what else?
That's it?
So at this point, we'll prepare an errata sheet for Wednesday's meeting to confirm the votes for today.
Great, great. Okay, there's not on here another opportunity for public comment, but if it's everybody, Rick, did you have something you wanted to say? You've been a great sport. You've been here all day. It's not on here, but it's your turn, my friend.
It was my fault I was late today. I misread the agenda. I thought it started at 9:30 and I was late. The idea of keeping the cars away from the pedestrians is, which has been brought up by the mayor a couple times, is very important. To me anyways, when I drive down Bonita Beach Road, coming off of Hickory, on the one side, you got the sidewalk and the curb right together, and you got kids and bicycles coming real close. And I always have to drive in the passing lane, and I do the speed limit, maybe a little over, but I'm always getting passed. They're always going, nobody wants to go 45 or 40, whatever the speed limit is. They've learned that they can go 5 miles over or better. But the separation between the people and the cars, and plus it gives it, if there's some reason a car needs to pull off the road in an emergency, it doesn't run over people either. So I think that's very important to keep separate as much as possible. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rick. Council, anything else?
No, I just wanted to compliment Audrey and Matt for, they've been involved in this for months, and what a fabulous job they've both done, so.
Arlene.
Did I say Audrey?
Yeah.
Thank you, Audrey.
I understand.
Arlene and Matt.
It's Arlene.
Starts with an A.
It starts with
You
an
get
A.
you get an A for effort.
Yeah. Thanks.
Would you like me reading statutes to
Right,
you?
yeah, it's late. Thank you, guys.
Council, anything else?
You good?
Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
See you.